All right, everybody, this is chapter 10. We're going to talk about beginning and ending our speeches. So let me click through. Okay, this is not important. This we've already seen. We've already seen this. Some of these are reviews from chapter 1. Okay, so this is where we start seeing new slides to us. So, in the introduction, we want to gain attention and interest. We want to reveal our topic. That might sound obvious, but I can't tell you how many times I've been listening to a student's speech, and that student is so excited about their topic or so familiar with their topic that it doesn't occur to them to be specific about what their topic is. So, for instance, this speech, you might be talking in your introduction and say things like, this is my favorite movie. I used to watch it all the time with my best friends growing up. And we really love the part where the kids have to go get the ball back and the dog is over the fence and they're scared of it. And it's just really good and everybody should watch it. The Sandlot is my favorite movie. And it took so long to get to the title of the movie that it can be frustrating for the audience because they're going, what are they talking about? So reveal the topic clearly, establish credibility and goodwill, and you're also going to preview the body. So if you think about it like this, in the introduction, you preview your main points. In the body, you develop and support those main points. And then in the conclusion, you review those main points. So preview in the intro, develop and support in the body, and review in the conclusion. Like I said in another chapter, think about it like in the intro, you write the check, in the body, you cash the check, in the conclusion, you provide the receipt. So, we're also going to relate our topic to our audience because we have to establish why this is relevant to them to keep their interest. You're going to state the importance of the topic. Why does it matter? Why this topic out of all the ones you could have picked? So the first two you need to do. The second two on this slide are optional and might be effective given your style. So you might want to startle the audience or arouse their curiosity. So for example, I had a student in a speech once. It wasn't for this speech that y'all are about to do, but it was a speech about heart disease and why people, it was a persuasive speech about why people should get screened for heart problems. And it was important to, well, specifically high blood pressure, actually, why people should get screened for hypertension and high blood pressure. And it was important to this student because her father had had a heart attack brought on by high blood pressure and it had been undiagnosed and he was otherwise seeming to be a pretty fit person. He survived incidentally, but the family was really surprised, and so they learned that this was way more common than they previously knew, and this student wanted to impress upon other people how important this is, how common of an issue it is. And so she and I ended up coming together and trying to figure out how she could make this relevant to an audience of young people because this is an important topic, but people who are very young are less likely to see it as an important topic because they're not likely to have high blood pressure or as likely as older folks. And so she said, Professor Butler, how can I make this relevant to my audience? And I said, well, they're your age, it's relevant to you, so I'm sure that you can. So what we ended up doing is we ended up finding whatever the statistic was, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but we found whatever the statistic was for the people who die in America every year of high blood pressure, at least at the time she did this speech. It was something like, I don't even remember, but I don't remember exactly, and I don't want to misquote, but it was four times whatever the capacity of, I believe it was Texas Stadium where the Cowboys played. And so it was a huge number. And so what we ended up doing is to humanize it and to make it startling and to make people more curious about it, but not in a frustrated way. We ended up, or she ended up with my guidance, showing an overhead view, a photograph of Texas Stadium filled to capacity. And so she said, what if she showed that at the beginning and of her introduction. And she said, what if I told you that X amount of whatever the number was that is the capacity of Texas Stadium? What if I told you that whatever hundreds of thousands of people, the equivalent of a full sold out Texas Stadium died every year of high blood pressure. And everybody was like, wow, that's a lot of people. And then she clicked the clicker again and it doubled the image. So then you saw two of the same photo side by side. So to the left, you had the same aerial overhead view of a sold out Texas stadium. And then you saw it again repeated to the right. So you had the image twice. And she said, what if I told you this many people? And it was twice the capacity. And then she clicked it again and it was three of the same picture. What if I told you it was this many people? And then, it's growing, growing, growing. And then finally she clicks it a fourth time and she goes, this many people, four times. And then, of course, she said the actual number, four times the capacity of Texas Stadium, sold out. This many people die every year of high blood pressure in the United States. So if it's not you, it could very well be your loved one. So let's talk about this. And then she had gotten the audience to understand how it related to them, why it was important, because it was so common. She startled them. They didn't know it was this common, and she got them curious to learn more. So that would be an example of that. You're going to need to know this slide for your exam because these are the 4 requirements and the purposes of your introduction. So make sure you know that. Okay. You want to use the introduction to gain attention. So some ways you might do that, you might question your audience. If you're giving a speech about texting and driving, you might say something like, how many of us text and drive, right? So that might be a question that, depending on how you deliver, it could be rhetorical, meaning it's not designed to be answered, or you could ask a question that you do want the answer to. Just word of caution, if you involve the audience, you can't bank on how they're going to be involved, what they're going to say, and so they might surprise you, and don't let that throw you. Prepare for that. You might begin with a quotation. As Martin Luther King Jr. famously said, just make sure that whatever quote you use ties back into your topic somehow, or you might start with a story. These are all options to gain attention. Credibility, this is very important. Credibility is not, in public speaking, sadly, credibility is not whether the speaker is qualified. It is the audience's perception of whether they're qualified. So that can be kind of scary when you think about it, because people can make themselves seem very qualified if they have good delivery and they have charisma, even though they're not. Or people who are very qualified might not read as very qualified because their delivery is stilted or they don't have very much presence. And so credibility is the audience's perception of the speaker's qualifications. Goodwill, not just a thrift store, is the perception, again, of whether the speaker has the best interest of the audience in mind. And so that's even scarier than the first one, because a speaker might be able to convince you that they have your best interest in mind. And so if you're asked in the audience, some of the scariest leaders that have ever had power and some of the best leaders who have done good things who have had power, what they had in common was that if you ask the audience of their followers if they had their best interest in mind, whether they did or didn't, the audience is going to say, yes, they did, because that's their perception. And so if we are aware that those perceptions can be manipulated and we're more cautious and we think more critically, we're at least less likely to support someone who doesn't have our best interests in mind, even though we think they do. And so the concepts of credibility and goodwill are on your exam, so know them. A preview statement, I mentioned this in a previous chapter. A preview statement is essentially your central idea from your topic outline said out loud with your mouth in the speech itself. That becomes your preview statement, and it needs to be in the introduction, and it is a single sentence that lists your main points, just like your central idea. So it's a statement near or at the end of the intro, identifying your main points that you plan to develop in the body. So for speech number 1, your main points might look something like, or your preview statement. Actually, let me try. Let me see if I still have this pulled up. Let me see if I can still bring this up. Yes, I do. Hold on. Let me share this with you. This is the preparation outline example that we've been using. Let me take you to the preview statement. This is the preview statement. See how it's at the end of the introduction? The song I Hope You Dance, performed by Leanne Womack and Sons of the Desert, is significant to me because it's the message my mom wanted to leave behind for me when she passed, significant to my audience because it touches on the idea that your experiences in life are what you make of them, and significant to society because it teaches them to live every day like it's their last and to never take things for granted. And now I'm going to transition into my body. So this tells the audience in one sentence exactly what they can expect. It's like I'm taking you on a road trip and I'm giving you the itinerary, and then I have you get in the car. Okay. So let's go back to the chapter. So that was the preview statement. We don't need that. This is on your exam. Be concise in your introduction. It should be no more than 10 to 20% of your entire speech. Look for materials as you research so that you're continuing to find out things and you don't just decide before you research what your intro is going to say, because you might be surprised and information does get updated and more current. So look for materials as you're researching and be creative to grab our attention. Finalize, we talked about this in a previous chapter. Finalize your intro after the body is done. You might sketch it out or have a rough idea before you write the body. That's fine. But go back and make sure you review that introduction and finalize it in conjunction with the body and what you've got in the body so that they match, so that you're not previewing something that you don't actually do or that is different. So think about it like a movie. I'm going to finish the movie before the trailer comes out so that the trailer previews the actual movie, because the movie I think I'm going to make might be different when it's finally said and done. So finalize after the body is done and work out the content and delivery in detail. Rehearse your intro. A lot of people will rehearse their body a lot and kind of phone in the intro and definitely phone in the conclusion. And the intro is the first thing that gets their attention. So it's very important. The body is where you develop everything. It's the bulk of the speech. So obviously that's important. And the conclusion is the thing they hear last. And that's the thing that's going to leave them with their final feeling and perception of your speech. So that's important. It's all important. So the conclusion signals the end of the speech and it reinforces that central idea, which is to say it reinforces your main points. It reviews your main points. Why do we need to signal the end of the speech? Don't we know it's the end of the speech when you stop speaking? Well, yeah, but it leaves the audience with a feeling of being unsatisfied. Think about a movie you've been watching and you might have been enjoying, and then all of a sudden the credits roll and you're like, that's it? That's the ending? It leaves you with a feeling that the speech is not finished. And in public speaking, that abrupt feeling can really leave the audience unsettled. A crescendo ending, there is a question on your exam about this. We're not going to probably do them in here because they're typically used for things like political rallies or sermons or protests or things like that, where people are trying to galvanize their listeners into action. So you're building to a zenith of power and intensity, and your voice is going to go up like this. You might hear it in a locker room speech, like, let's go out and beat those bears or whatever, right? Or let's take to the streets. Like, you're going to hear it kind of swell. If it sounds like I'm not swelling as much as somebody might in that kind of rallying cry, it's because Zoom settings will cut my microphone off if I get too loud or too high. And so I don't want to clip the microphone. So that's why I'm holding back a little bit. So someone who's famous for these, and I wish I could play this, but remember, I've told you in every video that when I'm sharing my screen, Zoom it just won't work. The videos get distorted or the sound doesn't, or they won't even play. So I wish I could play this for you. This is Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have Been to the Mountaintop speech. It is in the PowerPoint provided to you on Wolf Den. So check it out. And if for some reason it doesn't work when you try to play that, look it up on your own. I Have Been to the Mountaintop. It's an incredible speech shortly before his death. And Martin Luther King Jr. was famous for these crescendo endings, these swelling to a pinnacle of power and intensity, these crescendo endings. Bill Clinton was also famous for these types of endings. And dissolve endings are ones, Barack Obama did a lot of dissolve endings when he was in office. You're generating emotional appeal in a different way, sort of the opposite of a crescendo ending, it fades to a dramatic statement, right? It goes down the steps instead of up the steps. And so a dissolve ending is used a lot of times in somber occasions where people want you to reflect. You might hear them in a sermon that is more thoughtful and more instead of galvanizing you into action, they want you to be introspective. Or you might hear it in a memorial service, or you might hear it in a commemorative speech, something that is more serious and thoughtful and introspective. And I mean serious in tone, not serious in terms of gravity and its importance, because crescendo endings are often used when things are very, very serious and important. I just mean sort of a more dramatic tone. So tips for the conclusion. These are not necessarily tips like they're optional, the first two, or the first one, I'm sorry. You've got to summarize the speech. That's the purpose of the conclusion. But the other three are optional and they are tips that you might use. You might end with a quotation. If you began with one, you might even refer back to it. You can refer back to the intro as it says in that fourth bullet point, or make a dramatic statement that gets our attention and gets us thinking about things. The main thing you want to remember, though, is that you don't want to include new information in the conclusion. There should be no new information in the conclusion. If we think about it like sort of the courtroom model, it's literally illegal for people, for attorneys, to put new information into the closing statements, because then the jury doesn't get to see those things cross-examined by the other side. They don't get to see them supported. And that's the last thing they're left with. So in a courtroom, you've got the opening statement. This is what our side is going to put forth. You've got the trial, which is where they have the testimony and the evidence. And then you've got the conclusion where they wrap up all the stuff that they showed you. So don't put new information in your conclusion. Look for materials while you're researching, just as you do for your introduction. Conclude with a bang, not a whimper. And that's important because a lot of people, a lot of students will give a really good speech and then at the end kind of apologize for it because they feel awkward because they don't know how to end the speech. So they're sort of like, that's it. Sometimes they'll even say that, that's it. Or sometimes they'll even literally apologize, like, sorry. So end with confidence, and don't apologize at all. Don't apologize with your body language. Don't apologize with your words. Just be confident. You did it. So accept that it was right and good because you can't go back and change it. So even if you don't feel like it went well, still end with power and be brief. So if the intro is 10 to 20%, the conclusion is 5 to 10%. It's the shortest part of your speech. So you get a lot of bang for your buck, and then the body is the rest of it. Okay. And then work out and your content delivery in detail so that you're not winging it, because that's when people tend to kind of phone it in and get nervous and just end the speech rather than actually concluding it. And that's it. That is chapter 10, beginning and ending the speech. Thank you so much.